Okay, so it turns out forcing animals to fight is not only very hard, but very illegal. Raccoons are stronger than they look.
Pokemon, the children's game about slavery.
That was a joke. I know animals don't count.
If you've ever wondered what represents the highest grossing media franchise of all time,
It's this yellow rat.
pretty much everyone knows what a Pokemon is. You can walk up to basically anyone on the street, and if they don't spit on you, then they could probably name at least Pikachu. The games, cards, and anime define many people's childhoods, including mine, and will probably continue to do so until the heat death of the universe.
So instead of going to jail on charges of animal cruelty, I have to do some community service. And there's no better community service than giving my unimportant thoughts on Pokemon. Before we talk about the actual games, let's quickly go over its creation.
Pokemon's original Japanese game was Pocket Monsters, and it was created by these two fellas in 1995. Fella number one got the idea of Pokemon from his childhood hobby of bug catching.
Childhood hobbies, huh? Game.
That's basically all I need to know before we start, so let's just jump into it. Pokemon Red and Blue were the first Pokemon games and released in February of 1996. They featured the original 151 Pokemon, and some people still think that these games are the best and that Pokemon never got better.
These people are called Gen Runners, and are wrong.
Don't get me wrong, I love some of the Pokemon in this generation.
Especially Bulbasaur. I like Bulbasaur.
Red and Blue were later followed up by Yellow 2 years later, but it wasn't a sequel, instead being an enhanced version with Pikachu as your starter. In all honesty, these games are just okay. I didn't grow up with them like many did, so I have no nostalgic attachment to them. They're slow-paced and lack so many features that are commonplace in future Pokemon games. I also find Kanto as a region really boring and flat, most of it being green and having very simple landscapes. This isn't the game's fault, because it was probably just the limitations of the Game Boy that caused its design to be the way that it is, and in future games, the issue is fixed. At the time of its release, Gen 1 was probably really fun, but now they don't compare to any future games. Of course, the main formula is still in, since this is where it was originated, so it still feels like a Pokemon game. Across the generation, they sold about 46 million copies.
These games were great starting points for the franchise, but at this point there's little to no reason to go back to them, since they've literally been remade twice. Let's move on to the second generation of Pokemon, Gold, Silver, and Crystal.
So Gen 2 of Pokemon is one of the best sequels to any game you could ask for. It features 100 more Pokemon,
Including the best one of all time.
2 new types of Pokemon, and the entire first game's map as post-game. That's right, as well as having Johto, a far superior region, it also features the entire region of Kanto with its 8 gyms, bringing the game's total to 16. That's insane. Released in November of 1999, the enhanced version Crystal, releasing the following year, Gen 2 are really good games. They started the tradition of featuring the legendary Pokemon, the Pokemon the in-game story surrounds, on the cover that would continue to this very day. The Pokemon added in this generation are just as strong in the design department as the first gen,
Except for him, he's the best one.
and they fit in really well. As great as these games may be, they still have some of the same issues as the first generation. The gameplay is slower than future titles, and some of the quality of life changes haven't been added yet. These are still not really the game's fault, as it was pushing the hardware by adding Kanto. In fact, it wasn't originally going to be included until Satoru Iwata helped Game Freak add it near the game's release. Across the 3 games, they sold about 30 million copies.
These games are fan favorites and cemented Pokemon as a series that will inevitably continue for the rest of time. Generation 3 is on a whole new console, the Game Boy Advanced, so it looked and sounded miles better than the first two generations. That's not to say they looked bad, it's pretty much as best as the Game Boy could do, but some of the original sprites did scare me.
Ruby and Sapphire released in November of 2002, with the enhanced version Emerald releasing in September of 2004, and definitely a game. Other than the visual and audio overhaul, as well as the new Pokemon introduced, they didn't really change much about the gameplay. I mean, it's slightly faster, and the designs of the old Pokemon are as solid as ever, and even the Horn region is great, but nothing too groundbreaking. The games are certainly good, but to me honestly just feel like just another Pokemon game. This gen introduced remakes of old games, with the remakes of Gen 1, Fire Red and Leaf Green, and this continued with remakes releasing in Gen 4 and 6. They started remaking the games because, unlike the first two gens, you can't send your old Pokemon to Gen 3 because of the new hardware it was on. However, this wasn't a problem from Gen 3 to 8 because they came up with solutions. The remakes allowed you to catch Kanto Pokemon that weren't in Ruby and Sapphire and added new content to the game, just making it better. Across the 5 games of Gen 3, they sold about 45 million copies.
Overall, Generation 3 was good and exciting, but just not as much as Generation 2. What's that I hear? It's time to talk about the best generation of Pokemon ever? I mean, if you say so.
Okay, so I might have a very slight bias to Gen 4.
Can you blame me?
Yes, fuck you. Diamond and Pearl came out in September of 2006. They were the first Pokemon games on the DS, and they took advantage of the upgraded hardware. They were followed up by Platinum 2 years later, and then the remakes of Gen 2, like Gold and SoulSilver, 2 years after that. The games in this generation are fan favorites, and rightfully so. The art and music in these games is honestly phenomenal, so much so that some would say this is where the series peaked. The Sinnoh region is also the most diverse and interesting region we've gotten so far, but of course the games aren't perfect. They have the usual small bugs and glitches in any Pokemon games, and they have the same basic gameplay as every other Pokemon game. The gameplay is very slow-paced on Diamond and Pearl. The slow animations and text speed were annoying to many players. Luckily, most of these issues were fixed in Platinum, and the fixes were carried over to the Gen 2 remakes. Speaking of those,
they're my favorite Pokemon games, and where I feel the series was at its best.
Since Generation 2 was already very good, getting repainted with the high-quality art and music from Gen 4 resulted in many people's absolute favorite Pokemon game. Across the 5 games in Gen 4, they sold about 39 million copies.
Alrighty, that was entertaining, but also all the energy I had to talk about fictional monster slavery. I'll repent more next week. Bye, I guess.